Hi everyone. Okay, so today is I know today is not the day that we're doing warm up 31, but I believe that we missed warm up 31 on the day of this. So please go back to page 43 and please add warm up 31 if you are missing warm up 31. Okay, so make sure you get this done and you pause it accordingly to be able to get this information and get your points. I'm not going to be stamping this one, but you'll get your 10 points on this one. Okay, so this is the notes on ecology. They're fill-in notes, so you should have gotten the page of notes now. And this is going to be glued down on page 7 when you're done. On the actual page 7, which is actually page 47, if you haven't started renumbering at this section, you need to add. You would not paste it down. I will go around with glue and I'll put it on the right page, right area, and then you go paste it down and you should be able to flip it over and do the summary right on your notebook. Okay, so make sure you add the title page. Make sure you date it with today's date, and you do have to make room for the EQ and write the EQ right underneath the title, like a subtitle. So you have the EQ for today. Okay, this is not part of the notes, but here we go. Ecology comes from the Greek oikos and logos, um, so fusion of the two words. And oikos means house, the place where we live, and logos means just the study of. So ecology is basically derived from these two words. Okay, so a really quick definition that you should not write down is that the ecology is the study of where organisms live. Okay, so we've got that. But this is not the definition that is the book definition. So the next definition is the one that you're going to write down. Okay, so ecology, the write out definition of it that you need to know is that the ecology is the study of the interactions of organisms with one another and with their physical environment. So, in other words, it is the study of the area, not only how the things that live in an area um, interact with each other, but also how they have to interact with the things that they have. So the amount of water or the kind of climate they live in or any kind of predator or anything like that would be something that would be studying ecology. So the house that we have for everything that we know that is alive on this planet is the Earth, or AKA otherwise known as the biosphere. The reason we call our planet a biosphere is because the prefix bio means life and sphere is globe. So it's a big globe that's full of life. So therefore, the biosphere is a living globe. And so that's what we have to understand it as, the Earth being our living globe or biosphere. And we find that when you study something this large, it's very difficult. It's hard to study something this large. So, instead of studying something so big, climate scientists, we've decided to break it down into smaller sections called ecosystems. And ecosystems are nothing more than sections of the biosphere that have things in common with each other. And this is one type of ecosystem that you see out there that we find around our biosphere. This is another type of ecosystem that we also see in the biosphere. This is the third type of biosphere we find in our ecosystem. This is very different from the other two. It is a desert. Finally, this is another ecosystem that we find in our biosphere. So you can see that there's many different types of ecosystem that we find in our biosphere. Okay, so in each ecosystem, we find different factors that influences what lives there and what can survive there, the life that exists in an area. This is a very short list, but you can definitely see that there's differences between these two lists. The one on the left seems to be things like light, water, temperature, aspect, cloud cover, seasons, location, altitude. Those are examples of things that definitely influences what can live in a particular ecosystem. And the things that live in that ecosystem are plants, animals, fungi, protists, and bacteria. So you can look at both of these lists and you know that there's definitely a difference between them. And that's what scientists have noticed. Therefore, we gave each kind of factor a different name, and that's what we're going to go into next. So, there's two major components of an ecosystem, kind of similar to there was two major lists that we saw just in the previous slide. Okay, the first major components, that first separation that we see are the biotic factors. That would be the second list. Would include all the living organisms within a habitat. So all the living things that live in that habitat are known as biotic factors. So in the previous slide, it would have been the plants, the animals, the fungi, the bacteria, and those things would be the living things that we find in an ecosystem. The second factor or component that we find are the ones that are not living, that definitely play a great part in an ecosystem. We call those the abiotic factors. They're the non-living physical aspects of a habitat. And we can pretty much say that those non-living physical aspects of a habitat are the ones that will dictate or allow certain plants and animals to live in those areas. So the abiotic factors play a great role on what type of biotic factors exist in a particular ecosystem. Okay, so remember that list. This is a little picture of the ecosystem known as the ocean. So you've been to the ocean, hopefully, and you can recognize this from maybe a movie or something. But this is the ocean, or a little picture of the ocean. And what your job is to do is in your notes, you have to add three biotic factors and three abiotic factors from this particular ecosystem. So it's up to you right now to fill in the three biotic factors and three abiotic factors in your notes. They are not going to pop up, so make sure that you pause here and write those in. Okay, so in this because ecosystems are fairly big, and even though they are only sections of the biosphere, ecosystems are still really big areas. So what we do is that we break ecosystems into sections that we can study. So ecosystems are broken down into communities. Communities are broken up into populations, and are broken up into individuals. And that's how ecosystems are broken up in order to study. Okay, so in your notes, you have these pictures. And so what you're going to do is that on the little boxes at the bottom, you have to fill in ecosystem communities, populations, and individuals and add the arrows. So you understand the relationship between ecosystems, communities, populations, and individuals. So point the arrows in the direction that they're broken up into. You can also, just make sure you write that in that section. So, just kind of to clarify the definition of what a community is, organisms that live together in an ecosystem basically is a community. So, all the organisms, all the living things that live in an ecosystem are known as a community. So, if you look at this picture of Pikes Peak, you can tell that it's been mowed. If you think about this, if you it would fire all of the groundspeople and just let this grow, would it look like this? Do you think it always looked like this? And that's something that we, as ecologists, look at and say, I don't think so. Somebody's been working on this. So, and if we leave it alone to just grow, it would no longer look like this. So I don't think any reasonable person would stand and look at it and say, you know what, it probably didn't look like this when these people found it. They probably just like made it look like this because it pleased them. Okay, so ecological succession. Ecological, suc- e- ecological succession is basically how we get from something that looks like that to something that looks like that. So something that looks like a desert to something that looks like a big giant city. That's what ecological succession is all about. And basically, ecosystems experience change over time. That is called ecological succession. Now, here we start off with the annual plants on the left-hand side. The annual plants, basically, those are plants that grow and then die at the end of the year, grow and die at the end of the year. Then you have perennial plants that start growing after a while. So after a couple of years of annual plants just growing and dying, growing and dying, growing and dying in a plot of land that's completely vacant, then you've got perennial plants that start settling the area. Perennial plants and grasses are basically they live year around. They don't have they may shed some leaves in the winter, but they stay alive during the winter and they'll come back. They stay there all the time. So now you start getting some plants that basically are there, year round, and not just like the annual plants that were dying every year. Then after a couple of years, you wind up with some shrubs. Some shrubs start growing in that area, and they start getting bigger, and there's bigger weeds and bigger still some perennial plants and grasses, still some annual plants that may still come around, but mostly you get these big shrubs. After several like 30, 40 years, you start getting softwood trees like pine trees, or in California, um, um, what do you call those? Palm trees. They start growing in that area. So you get a whole bunch of palm trees in California that grow like those ugly palm trees that we always see in a vacant property. They start growing in after many years of being vacant. So somewhere around the 20, 30-year range of a vacant lot, you start getting pine trees that start growing or palm trees that start growing in California. And after like 50, 60, 70, 80, hundreds of years of vacant lots where you get vacant land that has not been manicured in any way, you start actually getting hardwood trees after a while. So we see this happening in nature, like when there's a fire, we see the succession happening. So like right now we experience a lot of fires, and assuming we get some rain in and stuff starts to grow in our mountains, this is how it's going to grow. Many of those trees that were burnt down during the recent fires in the area surrounding us, well, we will never see in our lifetime because they won't grow, they won't get to that change or stage of ecological succession for a good 100 years. So many, when there is a fire and we lose a lot, like a forest or parts of a forest, if they get lost now, this succession takes hundreds of years. So we are never going to see that forest come back. We may see it starting to come back, but we're never really fully going to see it develop back into what we saw it to be originally within our lifetime. Okay, so this is on you. You have to come up with at least, okay, so number one is a jungle. That's just a little picture of a rainforest jungle. The second picture is a desert, in case you haven't recognized it. And the third picture is like a wetland, so a marsh or something like that. So you've got an egret there in the water, so with grasses in the background. So that ecosystem. So you've got three ecosystems here. And you're going to have to name four biotic factors in each of them and four abiotic factors in each of them. And how the abiotic factors affect or relate to the biotic factors, give two examples. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that on the next page. So you have to basically here, this is how yours is formatted. So the top four is the list for the biotic factors and the abiotic factors. Now, what you have to write here is fill in the things like, let's say you say your biotic factor is plants. Okay, your abiotic factor is water. So if there is no water, then there is no plants. That would be like your first one. You could write it right in there. And then you have to pick another of your abiotic factors and then relate it to the biotic factors. So if there is no plants, then there is no photosynthesis. Or if it is no sun, there is no plants. Things like that. So you can come up with just kind of relate two of the biotic factors to the abiotic factors and write an if then. If there is no this, then there will be no that. Kind of like how one relates to the other. And you have to do that for all three of them. Okay, so now that you've finished this, you should be going on to page 9. Page 9 is another set of fill-in notes, and the EQ on this one is how do biotic factors interact with an ecosystem. So now that we know the difference between abiotic factors and biotic factors, now we're going to get into the science of how um, the living things in an ecosystem interact with one another. So, m- a habitat is the environment that meets the needs of an organism. So, like this tree, it's like has needs, and it lives in this area that provides it with the needs it has. The niche is the organism's role or job in the environment. So this, what does this tree provide? And that's what we're looking at here. So this tree can be a home for animals. It provides shade. It provides food. But even if it doesn't produce if it doesn't produce fruit, many types of insects can actually feed on the leaves. It has a job in this environment, and you write down that job. It's going to pop up at the bottom. A couple of examples will be fine. So, there's three types of jobs or niches that organisms can have in an ecosystem. And so we've got producers, consumers, and decomposers. Producers are those organisms that produce their own food for energy. Plants and algae are examples. Consumers eat other living things for energy, for example, birds and humans. Decomposers feed on the waste of plants and animals and their remains after they die. Now, in your notes, you understand there's different types of consumers or levels of consumers within an ecosystem. So that's why you have to skip A, B, and A, B, C, and D before you write decomposers. So there's four types of consumers. There's herbivores, there's carnivores, and omnivores, and scavengers. Okay, so herbivores are organisms that only eat plants, otherwise known as primary consumers. Carnivores eat meat or other animals. Omnivores eat both plants and animals. Scavengers basically eat dead organisms, okay, like vultures, flies, cockroaches, and hyenas. Okay, ecosystem needs energy for its organisms to survive. So all organisms need to get energy by eating or making their own food. So the whole ecosystem depends on the amount of energy that gets put into it. Without energy, an ecosystem will die. Okay, so at the top of this, if you're going to get the pop-up of the food chain, so put the title in the box provided. Then the sun is the primary source there, and you've got the water that's going to come in, and you've got your primary producers, which are the grass. Then you have your primary consumer, which is a grasshopper, your secondary consumer, which is a snake, and then you've got your tertiary consumer, which is a hawk, and then you've got your decomposer, which is a fungus. And this is what you have to label um, your worksheet on page 4. And then movement of energy within an ecosystem can be shown with a food chain. So basically, a food chain shows you how the movement of energy flows through an ecosystem. And you should take notice of the arrows. The arrows follow the path of the energy. And this is really important. You're going to be creating a very simple food web in the next set of notes. And people often make that mistake of pointing the arrows the wrong way. Basically, you are pointing people try to point them towards like the food that they're eating when you're supposed to point them towards where the energy is going. So make note of that, and when this next set of notes that we do in class, you're gonna check how much you actually understand that. So the sun is the original source of energy, and movement of energy within an ecosystem is shown using a food chain. Okay, so food web is a better representation of how energy is passed in an ecosystem. If you look at this compared to the food chain that we just looked at, this is more like what actually happens in nature. It's a very complicated relationship between the animals and what they eat. Most animals don't just eat one thing, they survive on many things for their survival. So you can see here how the energy is moving up towards the big predators. But you've got the smaller ones, the primary consumers, and then you've got your secondary consumers and your tertiary consumers, and it's a mess because these things don't just many organisms don't just eat one type of thing; they eat many types of things to survive. So you get a very complicated relationship, and this is called a food web, and it is a truer representation of what we see in nature than a food chain. And here we've got a feeding relationship usually form complex food webs within an ecosystem. So basically here we've got a food web, but this is in the ocean ecosystem. So we look here at the bottom, we've got phytoplankton. Phytoplankton is basically photosynthetic plankton. It's basically little plants of the ocean. They're microscopic. And the ones that eat this are krill, euphoricids or krill or herbivorous, sorry, plankton or copepods, they eat phytoplankton. Okay, so basically, you get these that basically eat phytoplankton. Phytoplankton is the photosynthetic, so they're the plants of the ocean. And you get little tiny copepods or krill that eat that. And then the krill will also eat the copepods, and carnivorous plankton eat the copepods, and you get this feeding relationship between them. The krill are being eaten by baleen whales, by crab eaters, by birds, by fish, by carnivorous plankton. The copepods are even eaten by carnivorous plankton, by squid, by fish. The fish are being eaten by all kinds of stuff. Also, elephant seals are being eaten and eating all kinds of stuff. And you can trace all the energy moving. Eventually, everything goes to humans because humans will consume any of the larger things. So we tend to eat the bigger things where we get less energy from them. But we could see the energy just moving towards the top. Okay, so you have gotten about halfway through the notes on this section, on page 9. The next section will be provided for you in class, so stay tuned. We're going to look at trophic levels, another way of dividing an ecosystem for study purposes. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to finish off those notes in class talking about trophic levels. So that'll be another presentation. So just finish up these notes, and as soon as you're done, you're going to finish up a worksheet. Please make sure you get a stamp on the previous worksheet and fill out all the multiple choice, the matching at the bottom of the previous page of notes that continues on the top. So make sure you do the matching and get your stamp on 3.1 notes. And then when you're finished with 3.2 notes, halfway, which is gonna, if you've gone to trophic levels, that's exactly what you should be. We're gonna do another set of notes on that.